Hey everyone, welcome to Retire with Style. I'm Alex and I'm here with Wade, and today we have your questions that want some answers. Right, Wade?
That's right. We are continuing with our question and answer series. We've got a lot of great questions, and we're even recording these a little bit in advance. I do believe for everyone listening, it's now the 2025 at this point. We did record this in advance, so we're not predicting the future or anything, but hopefully everyone's doing well.
So, hi, future Wade. How are you?
Hello.
What is past Wade up to? What was past Wade up to at getting near Thanksgiving?
Yeah, I was just telling Alex, don't talk about Thanksgiving because this isn't airing until January. But,
Well, I
but I
didn't say
know
how was
Alex
it
has been.
Thanksgiving. I
I
said
know
what
you've
what,
been
what
gearing up with a lot of plans to become a pickleball master and to take your cold plunges every day. So how's that all going?
Yeah. As same thing we did last year. I'm in DC. I'm in effectively Alexandria, Virginia, which is Greater DC. Unlike in Dallas, where Wade's in. Although I don't know if you could do this in Dallas. I just get a horse trough that I put out in the backyard. I took it from Marlene. That's my mother-in-law. I put it in the backyard. I fill it up with water. Put a little chlorine or whatever that is, hard water tablets or the like, and I use it for like a week at a time. And every morning I jump in, and shortly thereafter I jump out, regardless. And last year, Wade, remember I did it from I ran November through April, I think, till it stopped getting cold. And so so far I'm about a week into it. So far so good. We'll see how that works on the inflammation. And yes, Wade, I'm gonna need that because we've got a pickleball thing.
Yeah,
2025 will be pickleball for Retire with Style. Right, Wade?
U.S.
Are you
tour.
ready? I've been convincing Wade, so by the time this comes out, he should be a pickleball expert. Wade and I are going to be doing. We're going to try to do a tour. We're going to take. We have a pretty big following on Retirement Researcher, and we're going to try an anchor where some main cities are, and visit as many as we can, and set up some pickleball tournaments around us to see who can take down Wade and myself in pickleball. What do you think, Wade?
Yeah, it sounds pretty fun. And at this point, I have not played pickleball. I am
It's
a I'm pretty good at ping pong. And I've heard that the skills translate. So we'll see how that goes.
all right. I'm more of a soccer guy, but I've been playing this feverishly since the summer, and I think I've got somewhat of a knack for it, but who knows, right? There's always a ringer somewhere. But yeah, I think it would be fun. We'll go out there and we'll do this via retirement researcher,
hmm
and yeah, we'll tap into the community and interact with them, and I think it'd be
Yeah,
fun.
I know I've got some pickleball courts in my community, and I know they're actually building a 22,000 square foot facility that's about a 10-minute drive away. So
But
I'll
they
have
just had
chances to go.
in Dallas. They had the World Championships. I don't know if you should
Yeah,
attend one of
you've
those.
told me
It's
about
amazing.
that, but
Dallas.
I read the Dallas Morning News on Sundays. I didn't see anything about that.
Well,
Although I
that's
also didn't
fine.
realize that Jake Paul, Mike Tyson fight was in town until after it already happened. So I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
Oh, I'm missing this stuff.
don't worry, don't worry. He's much more up to date with pickleball than he is with social events and boxing. So it'll be a challenge. Yeah, I think in Texas, you have Dallas and Austin are huge pickleballs. I'm sure there's others I don't know, but those are the ones that come across a lot. You have Arizona, Utah, of all places. Obviously, Washington, the state, big pickleball. Kansas City's another big one. You have these pockets.
Never would
South
have guessed it.
Carolina. I don't know. Obviously, Florida, but
Yeah, I would have guessed Florida.
we
Although
can we
it
can.
started more as a sport for retirees, but it's really expanded into everyone at this point, right?
Oh yeah, when I go there, I think I told you I dropped my kids off. I was at Virginia Tech, and the courts there were, I want to
Oh,
say maybe
college.
15 courts, tennis courts, because they repaint them. They use half of a tennis court for a whole pickleball court,
hmm
and so I want to say 10 of them were painted for pickleball, and they were all full, and with a line with about 20 people in waiting. It's kind of a hipster. It seemed to me to be like a hipster thing for the younger people. But no, I'm 51. If I go to an open park where there's open play, I'm by no means am I youngest. I'm on literally the bottom 25% when it comes to age of everyone there. So yeah, it's pretty interesting. But that's for another show, I guess. But more to follow, folks. Like I said, and we're gonna do a U.S. tour, pickleball tour. Wade and myself take on all comers. So bring it on, right, Wade?
That's right. We
All
have to
right,
start that in San Diego because we're going to both be there in March.
there you go. San Diego would be awesome. Yeah, there it is.
Yep.
First one, San Diego. Maybe we
That's
show
your
up a little
job.
early
Get
for that conference. You're talking about the
get a bit.
American College Conference, right?
Yeah, the American College Conference at the beginning of March.
That'd be good.
Book it, Dano.
That's it. It's in the record. So far, Southern California crew, we coming, we coming. All right. All right,
All right.
now we've been doing a lot of Q&As to wind down the year and to spruce up the new year. And
Spruce up the new
so
year.
here we go with some more questions. And you want me to break the ice here, Wade?
All right. Sounds good.
All right. So Wade, there's the two-parter. The first parter is, can you explain how the whole life products, parentheses MM, I assume Mass Mutual or something like that?
I think so in that context.
All right. Can you explain how the whole?
Like
I
a
don't know
market.
I don't know what else MM would stand for. Can you explain how the whole life products area? I'm sorry. Can you explain how the whole life products are a leg on the stool to retirement planning to provide stability in market downturns?
Uh-huh. And I did group that with a second question because they were asking on it's the same general theme.
All right. You want me to ask the second parter?
Yeah, we can do it
All right.
all
Yeah, it's
all
not a
in one.
question. He's saying his situation. I enjoy your show as a newly retired 62-year-old. I am looking for software that incorporates some of Wade's logic for reverse mortgages. I am looking to quantify the benefits of using the reverse mortgage in down years to avoid drawdowns of my IRA, fitting into lower tax brackets, etc. I need to justify the $22,000 initial cost. Thanks.
Okay. So yeah, both of these questions are getting at the idea of the buffer asset.
Uh-huh.
So I talk about how there's four broad ways to manage sequence of returns risk. You can spend less, be variable or flexible with your spending, reduce portfolio volatility, or number four, the buffer asset, having this asset held outside the portfolio. The asset is not correlated or particularly, usually there's some sort of growth involved, but no decreases. So if markets are down, this buffer asset's not going to decrease in value. And then it provides a temporary spending resource to cover your spending needs in retirement during times that you've defined that your portfolio looks to be in trouble, to give your portfolio an opportunity to recover and then at some point resume taking distributions from your portfolio again. So that's the buffer asset concept. And there's really only three buffer assets out there. And these questions touched upon two of them. The one not mentioned was just cash. You have a big pile of cash sitting on the sidelines. You don't treat it as part of your portfolio. It's more just there as a spending resource during times of market volatility. You've got the cash value of whole life insurance, which was the first question here, where you structure policy loans from the cash value as that temporary spending resource. Or you have the growing line of credit on a home equity conversion mortgage, aka a reverse mortgage, which is also proceeds from a loan. So really works in a very similar manner as whole life insurance would do for that. And indeed, sequence of returns risk works in really funny or odd or strange ways
Do
that
you want to
small
really
adjustments.
quickly, just because I'm not sure everyone
Oh yeah, okay.
knows and it's used a lot, and it could be one of these words that's used a lot, but no one really understands it to some extent. Real quick.
Yeah, the idea of sequence of returns risk, it's one of the key drivers of what makes retirement different from pre-retirement. If you're having to sell from your portfolio to cover spending needs, a market downturn has a bigger impact on you. Because if the market goes down, you have to sell more shares to meet your expenses. That leaves less in your portfolio so that even if the overall market recovers, your portfolio won't enjoy the full market recovery. And what it effectively does is it amplifies the impacts of investment volatility because it makes those early retirement years disproportionately very important. You need to get those good market returns in a short period of time in early retirement, or if you get a bad sequence of returns early in retirement, it can be very problematic. But a really powerful way to manage that risk is, okay, just don't have to sell from your portfolio during market downturns. And that's what the other things are getting at. The spend less, you're less likely to get into that downward spiral of having to sell more and more of what's left. Variable spending, if you can cut your expenses after a market downturn, you don't have to spend as much. It helps manage the risk. Reducing portfolio volatility, then you're not as exposed to market downturns. And then this buffer asset idea, having this alternative resource to draw from on a temporary basis lets you meet your spending needs with a resource that actually doesn't get added to your adjusted gross income. So it can also help with taxes as well, to give you that opportunity to let your portfolio recover so that you're not locking in losses. You're getting that chance for portfolio recovery. And indeed, both of these can work quite effectively in that regard. So if you've got a permanent life insurance policy, it might be something you consider. It's the volatility buffer asset concept. The second question, it was thinking about using a reverse mortgage for that sort of opportunity. And then in terms of rules about, well, when do I draw from it? I looked at a number of different rules, and there's a lot of research out there about different decision rules. When do I spend from my investments? When do I spend from my buffer asset? I found that an easy one that works just as well as anything more complicated. You kind of write down your investment balance on your retirement date and just keep that number in mind. And if your investments at any point are worth more than that when you want a distribution, take it from your investments. If the investment balance has fallen short of where it started at the beginning of retirement, and you don't even have to worry about adjusting for inflation, just that number, the value at the start of retirement. Well, if it's below that value, cover your spending needs through your buffer asset. And that's a really powerful way to help give greater long-term growth opportunities to the investment portfolio, which can more than offset the costs of the buffer asset. And there's can be significant costs for the life insurance, for the reverse mortgage, but net of those costs, the research can really suggest that this is very powerful, and you'll have a bigger net legacy at the end of retirement, even after paying for the costs, paying off the loan balance for either of those buffer assets.
What I would add to that, Wade, is and this goes back to, when we do the retirement income challenge and we spend the first day just talking about frameworks. Something that I like about that, while you were saying it, and made me think about it, because there's no magic for you saying if your statement is above the day you retired or below the day they retired. You could have said $10 above, or $100 above, or $1,000 above or below, or whatnot. The most important part, folks, to me, is that he's given himself. Wade is providing objective an objective rules based framework for you to make that decision when you're not troubled by the heat of the moment, if you will. And I think that's that's an important fact. Not fact, but that's an important dynamic when you're thinking about, is this rule interesting or not? It becomes interesting to me when you do things to reduce human judgment at the moment of anxiety, right? And so if you don't have like a rule like this, you tend to then say, you know what? But the market's going to come around, so I'm going to take from my investments. Or the market's not going to come around. You know what? The election, I can see this thing happening already. The inauguration is probably right around the time of this podcast release. You know what? I don't like how this is going. I'm not taking from my investments because it's going to go down. And lo and behold, it goes up. That kind of thing. And so the more you remove yourself from that and you give yourself a rules-based system that's based on rational thought, that becomes very interesting to me, both as a planner who's providing advice to folks, but also as an individual, because I know thyself, right? And that's something I think we all need. And so I just wanted to point that out, Wade.
Look at you flexing those behavioral muscles, bringing in that psychology, human psychology.
That's me, Mr. Softy.
And I'm Mr. Quantitative.
Yes, that's me.
So it's a good blend. Yeah, there's behavioral benefits from having that buffer asset. It helps you
great.
weather market volatility.
Well, I'll say it another way. Could it save you from a $22,000 mistake? Absolutely. It could save you from a $2 million mistake. And we've seen those. Just as we've seen acts of omission as much as acts of commission in this game, and so you both of them are just as nefarious.
Yeah. So if drawing from that buffer asset also helps you, like as a side benefit, avoid panicking and selling off after a downturn, yeah, that's where you could have that even bigger benefit that we're
Yeah.
I'm just assuming they stick to the asset allocation being modeled for them. But we
Once you
know.
start, once you start going off the, once you start going off track, it's a slippery slope.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I initially I said slippery soap, and then I was like slurp. I had to catch myself. I was like, oh my
You got
goodness.
it out.
And there's no way I'm gonna be able to read this next one. But you want to try? You want me to try it? Just as
Yeah, the next one is about the length of War and Peace. So
I was thinking, the brothers Karamazov, but that's
there you
fine.
go.
Or
Yeah,
Anna
that's an epic.
Karenina. All right, those are books everyone loves to point out, but I don't know how many people have read. Uh, Here we go. Hi, Alex and Wade. I really appreciate all of the advice and materials you have made available. I have learned a lot from the podcast and Wade's book. I am still 20 years from retirement and have what I think is a solid accumulation phase plan, saving more than 25% of income each year. Now he's showing off, right, Wade? No. Congratulations. My recent results for implementation have me in the self-directed plus no advisor lowest right box. Wait, he put that in bold. Like he really wanted you to know that. No, I'm kidding. No advisor lowest right box. I am very comfortable making calculations, even coding in Excel, but have fundamental questions about assumptions in my projections. Specifically, I am using a conservative assumption of after inflation return of only 3% per year. An 80-20 broad portfolio, by the way, 80% being equities, I would assume. With this rate applied to each end of year balance and my yearly contributions added after compounding, I calculate wealth 20 greater than 25 times our yearly spending by age 65. When they say that yearly more than 25 times, that's another way of saying distributing less than 4%. I'm sorry, distributing less than 12% a year. He's just backing
Four
into the,
percent.
yeah, 4%. He's just back, yeah, sorry. He's backing into the distribution rate. So obviously 100 divided by 4 is 25. Continuing the projections in this way, we can comfortably delay Social Security to 70 and make Roth conversions in those 5 years, all the while covering our current level of spending. But I realize this is all modeled in 2024 dollars, essentially ignoring inflation. Is this fundamentally flawed? My thinking is that our nominal spending will likely double by retirement. Dollar value will be half in 2044 with 3% inflation per year. But that would mean by retirement I need twice the target amount of wealth accumulation to cover those inflated spending rates. This seems like an exorbitant amount, which in parentheses would equate to 50 times spending, which is a 2% safe withdrawal rate, which is hard to process. But I realize in 20 years, each dollar will be worth half as much. So if I assume the total market return matches my assumption of 3% real return plus inflation, and in parentheses says, and that is a sufficiently conservative estimate to ignore sequence of returns as well, end of parentheses, and assuming our yearly spending increases less than or equal to inflation, is there a fundamental flaw in making projections to retirement age using today's dollars? Question. So that's the second, like, question. If so, in parentheses, and I still want to build this myself without more complicated software, end of parentheses, what assumption for yearly rates of return and inflation should be built into each year's row to make the projections more robust using conservative assumptions? I want to save aggressively such that we can weather poor returns between now and retirement and hope to be pleasantly surprised many years with more than 3% real return. I hope this isn't too long and makes sense. Thank you for all your help. You guys are awesome. I've read that. You've been able to comprehend it better than I do because I'm just trying to pronunciate. Uh, I'm just myself. My initial reading is I'm all over the place, and I didn't want to read this before this. I just wanted to, assimilate it. I'm confused with real, nominal, rates and then the returns, but the returns are real, and then like I'm all, like is it an apples? Was it apples and apples throughout, or did he mix, or he or she mix it up in between the inflation and real returns and all that kind of stuff? I don't know. I'd have to
Yeah.
read it again, but
Well,
you've heard it now.
yeah, that part got a little confusing, but the answer is ultimately going to be as long as you're consistent, there's no problem. And so let me expand upon that a little bit. Actually, this isn't all far away from what I do for my own personal financial modeling. I use
Don't encourage him, Wade. Don't encourage him.
I'm a little more conservative. I use a 2.5% real return and actually 2.5% inflation, which I guess is more aggressive. The higher inflation would be more conservative. So 5% nominal return. He's at, I believe he, right? Yeah, at 3% real with 3% inflation, 6% nominal return. That's a still relatively on the conservative side, at least with
Oh,
regard to
you
historical
have to
data.
also adjust for his advisory fee.
He's do it yourself. Yeah, you'd want the
Okay.
gross returns though, net of advisory.
Yet here we are. All right, now I saw who. Hey, I'm just playing. I play with everyone. Go on, Wade.
Uh-huh. I did lose my track of thought a little bit, but
I'm quiet. Go on.
what were we saying? So he's well, like if you're using a Monte Carlo plan, like you're targeting a high probability of success, that will correspond to a low fixed rate of return assumption. And so, like what I like to do, it's related to our funded ratio, and what he likes to do is just work from a conservative rate of return assumption. In his case, 3% real, 3% inflation, 6% nominal. Okay, that's backdrop to then the question is, all your future spending, you tend to want to increase with inflation. Now, you've got two options here. You can either do everything in real terms, so all your spending is in today 2025 now dollars, and then okay, 30 years from now I want to spend $60,000 in 2025 dollars, the real purchasing power today. You can set up everything that way, but then just use the 3% real rate of return for looking at the portfolio growth. If everything's in real terms, you're fine. Real spending for the future, real rate of return on investments. Alternatively, and it's probably easier to define your spending in today's dollars, but then as you build the spreadsheet, you can then just apply the inflation rate on all that spending for the future. But then, so that will make the spending grow, but it's completely offset by the fact that your investment return in that scenario would include inflation. So you get to use the 6% return instead of the 3% return. And either way, you'll get the same answers, other than a few minor kind of details that might be relevant, which are a few of the numbers in the tax code do not adjust for inflation, assuming you're calculating your taxes. Like if you're just going to say, I'm going to pay tax on 85% of my Social Security, you don't have to worry about that issue. The net investment income tax kicks in at numbers that don't adjust for inflation as well. But other than that, as long as you're consistent, increasing your spending by inflation, and then using that nominal, in this case, 6% rate of return, you'll get the same answer as if you assume all your future spending is in today's purchasing power, and then applying the 3% real rate of return. They're equivalent to each other because with the nominal spending grows for inflation, the investments include inflation. I could just factor the inflation out of everything, and then I'm left with everything in real terms. The spending is in real terms, and then the investments grow at a 3% real return.
I just as an aside, Wade, I've noticed when we do plans for clients and the like, they appreciate it all in today's dollars. Like even
It's a lot yeah, because if you say I'm going to spend
$1 million a semester for Virginia Tech in 30
30
years,
years from now.
it's almost like unconscionable.
Well, you can't wrap your head around what it
Yeah,
means
yeah, exactly.
because of the compounding power. Like with he noted with 3% inflation, it actually takes 23 years for the cost of living to double. So if we're talking about spending 40 years from now, well, what is that exactly? It's going to be somewhere in the
It's always
ballpark to
I always like to see it in
four
today's
times.
dollars because it's just more
Uh-huh.
it's just more tangible for me that way.
Yeah,
I
think about all your budgeting in today's dollars. And then in your spreadsheet, you could apply the inflation to it and then use the nominal rate of return, or just keep it all in today's dollars and use the real rate of return. As long as you're being consistent, everything's in real terms or everything's in nominal terms, it'll work
yeah.
fine and you'll get the same answer and you'll be okay.
To be clear, too, Wade, I don't have an issue one way or the other. It's consistency. That's why I was reading the question and I was just wondering. I would have to reread it to make sure that it was apples and apples. If it's apples and apples, I don't really. It doesn't matter. It's whatever you like. But I
I,
wanted to add that point that I just think people tend to have the aha moment easier when they see it in today's dollars. Because
and then
it's sometimes you do plans and they're 40 years out and you're telling somebody, oh, you're going to have $40 million. Who cares?
and where you would make a mistake is if you had everything in today's dollars, but then you use that 6% investment return because that's a nominal return.
That's
Then your
where I was.
investments would be growing too fast and you'd be missing out on the inflation adjustments for your spending.
That's what hit me in the question that I wanted to read over because I was like, let me just because we've seen that go sideways. This also, I'm going to take a little pause so we can maybe edit it for another question. But just to go off to go off here a little bit from a Q&A, this is a question I've now developed as you were answering that. And let me try to ask it formally. Wait, a lot of folks seem to ask you, what returns do you use for this? What softwares do you use for that? And for folks that are very meticulous and analytical, they love to create their own software while they also shop around for consumer softwares. You've done some research behind this. I'd love to get your thoughts directionally. I know this was going to be a big project, but then ultimately it was like there's nothing there. So what directionally did you find? And what's the best advice you can give to somebody that's creating their own Excel in terms of when you did it, what were like the 2 or 3 things you may have wished you knew a little earlier that would have saved you time? To like, oh man, why didn't I start from A1 instead of A2? I don't know. I'm being silly, but what are some things you can help them? So it's a two-parter. Directionally, people that want to find things themselves because they don't want to use an advisor. And obviously, we think an advisor adds value, but we're not here to make that argument. We're assuming, okay, not a chance, and there's no way this person will see an advisor. They either want to find the software themselves somewhere, this Eldorado software, or they want to create it themselves.
Well, yeah, we have the funded ratio tool with Retirement Researcher, and that it's not that hard to build a funded ratio tool. It can be done relatively easy in a spreadsheet, except for taxes. By far, like 95% of the work of the funded ratio is building in the taxes.
And it's not effective tax rate. It's an actual.
And that's using conventional wisdom as a spend down strategy. Yeah, then trying to overlay Roth conversions would be another doubling the amount of work. But if you leave the tax calculations aside, the funded ratio isn't that big of a project. And I think that's what anytime you're building a spreadsheet where you're using an assumed rate of return on the investments and assumed spending for the distributions, it's kind of that's a cousin of the funded ratio. They're going to be pretty similar in terms of the fundamental underlying calculations. It's just treating the approach slightly differently. And so then when you compare that to all the commercial consumer software that's out there, yeah, I was planning to do a big project, really digging into all the different consumer software, but I was mostly interested in looking at the Roth conversion modules, and I was not impressed with what's out there, and ultimately didn't really see. It wasn't interesting to to dig in deeper, so I kind of dropped that idea of doing a massive review of all these different online calculators.
What would you say then to follow up? What are the biggest sort of, hey, this is a hurdle that you're going to hit, and this is how I would scale it as you're building this out? What are 1 or 2 tips you can give somebody that that is an engineer, frankly, an analytical engineer that loves this, breathes this stuff, and really just wants to get in the weeds for another reason than they love numbers? And so, what advice would you give them? So they do not like go into some sort of rabbit hole when you're thinking about creating this.
Well, to realize that the taxes would be the hardest part, but a simple workaround is assume some sort of like average tax rate on whatever I'm going to spend in a given year. Let me assume I have to add on another 10% to that to cover the tax bill. And in retirement, like a 10%, that might be a conservative number unless you've got tens of millions of dollars that you're working with. So that could be a very simple workaround to deal with taxes and to not
Wait,
worry
I
about
do. I
doing.
have tens of
Yeah,
millions of dollars that I am working with.
then you
So
may
this
have
is
to use
very
higher than
interesting for me. So please take your time.
that. But even just for folks who have less than $1 million, you might even be able to use like a 5% effective tax rate. Just whatever your spending goal is, add another 5 to 10% to cover the taxes, and add that as an additional expense in your funded ratio, and you're good. And yeah, I guess the rabbit hole to try to avoid falling down is if you want to build in the tax calculations, that's where 95% of the work is going to be. You can get a very nice funded ratio. It's going to work pretty well with a very simple estimate of your taxes and give you something that you'll be 90% to the right answer before you add that extra 95% of the work to calculate the taxes.
Okay. And this, my friends, is why there aren't that many consumer softwares that are high level for these kind of things, because they would require such specificity around the tax codes that they can't, it's hard to support it on a mass consumer scale. That's the only thing I can think of, and we've discussed this
Mhm.
before, but just
Yeah,
FYI.
that there's good software for advisors because the advisors can scale better. They can pay a higher price for the software. Consumers can buy the advisor software. It's just expensive because it's designed to use with all your clients. And so there's the economies of scale that as an advisor, if I can use this with 50 different clients, maybe I can justify the expense
And
more
it's,
than.
yeah, exactly. And it's safe to assume an advisor has a level of knowledge that they're already informed. They're not going to have as many questions, so they're easier to support, et cetera, et cetera. That's my conclusion. It's just my own anecdotal observation of why there isn't more. But I think economically, the product market fit just isn't there to do one that's serviceable for the people that would want to do it themselves. And there it is.
There it is. So I guess I've got a question for you. And after the long question, we've got a short one.
All right.
Okay, Alex, how often do you watch or track the market and your investments? Or do you just keep buying and never check?
Okay. Uh, Myself personally, we talked about this earlier. At the beginning of the year, of every year, I kind of take a sense of what I need to save, right? How much do I need to save? Myself, I put we as a family, how much do we want to save to make sure that we're accumulating and that the train is, is chugging along, right? And so that's automatic. I don't think about it. It's, as I front load as much as I can, and then we leave buffers, and then we just do it as we go on. When that go and by do it, I mean like automatic contributions, things like that. All right. And in addition to 401ks, I automatic wires for excess cash just goes out. We don't even think about it, and it goes into a model portfolio that we have. Myself, I am a client of my client, so it goes in and off it goes. How often do I look at that? De minimis. Now, why? Because I'm not looking at the number per se from January to February. Did it go up? Did it go down? I think it was something like I did this a while ago, but if I took every day, let's say the Dow Jones, just because I did the Dow Jones because it had a lot of variability, and now it's becoming. I think people are realizing it's a stupid index to even report on. But the Dow Jones, it goes up or down by so much every day, right? And so, regardless, I took the total value that went up or down every day at the end of the day, not like during the day, intraday, because that's even more so. And it had gone up for the year I did it. It went up something like 110,000 points, 110,000 points, and it netted at the end of the year like a 400-point difference from the beginning of the year. Think about that for a second. and like the year after that, it's not too far off. It's much closer to that number I just put out there. And so think about the waste of time and anxiety it would have caused me to be like, oh my goodness, look at this. Oh my goodness, Biden went up the steps. Oh, I'm selling. The Trump went down the escalator. Oh, I'm buying. That kind of stuff. Or China, this, the balloon. Oh my goodness, there's so many things, and it's just gonna drive you crazy. And so my own stuff, I don't even know. Honestly, I couldn't tell you. I couldn't guess. I know more or less like at a thing, but when it gets down to a certain level, I know that I'm saving enough, and I know it's doing its thing, and that gives me solace, and I don't need to worry about it. And I look at other people's more than my own, to be frank, because I do it just in preparation for meetings and in preparation for calls and things like that. Now I look at CNBC every morning. Now I don't do it because hey, what's going on? My situation's a little different. I want to know what's happening from a news standpoint, the same reason that I follow sports or something like that. Sunday morning, the football games and the pregame shows. I do it just to understand what clients are listening to and what they're being messaged. I find it very valuable for that. So for me, I watch it religiously because it's a game of he said, she, I got to understand what they're saying so I can already develop arguments for or against, or what they're saying, because it's good. And then it keeps me up with current events. I don't watch like CNN or MSNBC or Fox or anything. I don't watch like the political news. I kind of just do it through CNN. And to me, that gives me enough signal that I can keep up with current events too. Wade knows I'm politically like so agnostic, it's embarrassing. So I don't follow it. Now, at the end of the day, I like to see percentages. Hey, how much did it go up by or down by? I have no idea numbers. I couldn't tell you more or less even in round forms. Is the Dow at 44,000 or this or that? I just know, the market went up by 1% today or 0.5% today. Why? Because I just like to get a sense of the tenor of that. And I know that doesn't mean anything. I see it like a baseball game. There are 162 games in the year. Does one game matter? No. But do I like to look at the box scores? Yeah. Why? Because I just like the smell of things. I just like how the markets smell. But I know that it doesn't mean anything, long term. So that's the best. So I just keep buying. I don't check. I'm just disciplined about that. And I don't do budgeting like Wade. Wade does budgeting. I figured if we're saving what we want to save, whatever's left over is to spend. It's not Brewster's Millions where we try to spend it no matter what. But I get the shrimp cocktail for appetizer. I don't like worry about budget like that if I know that the money that we have is saved accordingly. Wade, how does that sound?
Take your family to Red Lobster.
Red Lobster, baby. Hey, soup and salad, bottomless soup and salad, and shrimp.
That's right.
I think Red Lobster stopped that, didn't they?
Yeah, I think the story is that's why they went bankrupt.
Yeah. I'm in what's this bottomless soup and salad at the Italian whatever.
The Olive Garden.
The Olive Garden. The Olive Garden. We had to move to the Olive Garden. Desserts on the house, everybody. No, but that's kind of how I ride. I don't. It'll drive you crazy. I have to know about it because if a client asks us, "Hey, how's the market doing this quarter?" and if I don't know it, it looks kind of weird. But the reality is, it doesn't matter too much. I mean, there's no other way of saying it. And if an advisor tells you differently, they don't know what the hell they're talking about. Honestly, because I don't think it matters all that much. Wait.
Yeah. So for me, the answer that you're supposed to hear is don't check it. Don't worry about it. Don't check it. I do check more than I probably should be.
Oh, you check? I don't. You really look at your account? I don't.
Well, actually, there's this idea of loss aversion where every day the market tends to go up more often than it goes down. But when it does go down, the pain of that loss exceeds any of the value of the ups. So actually, when the market's going up, I check more frequently. And then like even in 2024, there's market downturns in like April and then in August and then again in September. But then it comes back up quickly again. And so when we get into one of those phases where the market keeps going down day after day, I tend not to check. It's like, okay, I'm just going to stay away from this.
You're just a bandwagon market watcher.
And then when the market starts going up again, then I'm, oh yeah, yay. This
You're like a Miami Dolphin fan the first two games of the season.
yeah. But
Yeah, but you don't make your decisions based on that. You're able to just you just like to ride the wave and be happy or this and that. But not many people can do that. So that's
yeah,
results
on
vary.
the budgeting thing, the reason I want to know how much I'm spending is to figure out how much I can save. And so as I have funds building up that I can make a new contribution into the investments, I want to make sure I don't need to hold on to that to pay something like a future tax bill or something coming up. And then, yeah, I just try to invest it when it's available to invest. Although maybe sometimes something's going on in the market.
No,
I never sell because markets are going down, but
the caveat too
maybe,
is I'm sure you're not. You also have cash on the side. Like I have cash, so it's I'm not drawing from my investments as the sole reason as my only income as any income at the moment. So I'm not concerned, and I don't need to dip into it for spending.
mhm. Yeah, and I have cash that just builds up until it's like a big enough number to bother with then investing it,
And that's
and
what
to
I do.
try to think ahead of what bills are coming due, that like estimated taxes and things.
So, and the other piece that, to say, because it's obvious, our business, our human capital, Wade and I, our human capital is tied into the market by virtue of the businesses we run. And so, to that extent, we know very much because we have to budget for the business too. And so, we know very much, what's happening in the market. But again, that's a different reason for why you're asking it. And I assume you're asking it as a consumer investor. As a consumer investor, I don't care. I really don't, because I believe that capitalism will work and there'll be positive rates of return, and there are certain risk premiums to be had. And if you find a good risk story that you can count on systematic forms of return, then everything else is just the waiting game. Frankly, as far as I'm
Yeah,
concerned.
yeah. If you're tempted to trade more because you're watching, then it's better not to watch. But if you can watch without being tempted to trade more frequently,
And I
I
have
guess
to, but I have to because of the
yeah,
business we've chosen, and it's not
right.
because I think Kramer says anything insightful. I could care less, or Josh Brown, or any of that silliness. I just watch because it's entertaining and current events, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Wade, let me ask you this question then. In case you ever are taking viewer mail, which is now, I'd be happy to pose. Well, you get all the parentheses.
Yeah,
In
there's a lot of
parentheses,
parentheses.
in more depth, you should be open to suggestions. Okay.
Should you be
I,
open to?
oh, should we be open? Should you be open to
You
suggestions?
should.
I sorry. I'd be happy to pose a couple of topics surrounding taxable investors, which I know aren't the majority. I think you'd be surprised. There's tons of. I just can't find a lot of writings dealing how a taxable investor might differ from those in tax deferred exempt accounts. I understand that the tax tail shouldn't wag the dog, but taxes are one of the few variables we can control. Boy, do we have an arc for them. Also, how a portfolio might differ depending on if someone were overfunded versus someone who might be adequately funding. And they're referring to the funded ratio there, I assume. For example, maybe not. For example, someone
Yeah,
with a
that's just
2
the inverse.
versus a 4 safe withdrawal rate versus the person barely funded. Take it away, Wade.
Yeah, the lower your withdrawal rate, the higher your funded ratio. So he's
Okay.
talking about one and the same. Um, yeah, I think ultimately, probably a lot of the big savers in the audience may be more tilted towards taxable, just because you fill up your tax advantage space, and if you're a big saver, you might reach the limits on your tax advantage space, and then everything else after that has to go in your taxable account. So I think a lot of our listeners may be in the situation where they do have significant taxable investments as well. It doesn't really change the story because, yes, indeed, asset allocation always is more important than asset location. But if you've got most of your assets in taxable accounts, being tax efficient is all the more important. low turnover, highly tax efficient index funds, less trading type funds, you don't have to worry about tax efficiency when you're in a tax advantaged account, because you don't pay those ongoing taxes, but you do pay those ongoing taxes in a taxable account. So focus on being as tax efficient as possible, on having your most tax efficient asset classes there, and less tax efficient to the extent you have some space in tax advantaged, putting your less tax efficient assets elsewhere. And the only other kind of consideration, well, that gets more into the funded side, is we talk about spending the taxable assets down first. But if you're primarily taxable assets and you think you may never spend them all down, you get that step up in basis at death so that your beneficiaries don't have to pay the capital gains tax. And so trying to preserve unrealized capital gains for your beneficiaries would be a secondary type consideration for you. And then on the funded question, we talk about when you're 100% funded, you have the least amount of, or you have the low level of risk capacity. You're vulnerable to market volatility. As you become overfunded, so as your withdrawal rate decreases, you have surplus wealth, the discretionary wealth. You can lock in your retirement lifestyle with a smaller percentage of your wealth and then treat that surplus for more discretionary growth. And so usually we talk about how as you become more and more overfunded, you can invest more aggressively, because you can lock things in and just invest for growth with the rest. It's really, those are assets that might ultimately go to beneficiaries and so forth. So that would just be the other angle on funded status. It's, if you're, depending on your retirement income style, if your income protection in particular, having that reliable income to cover your basics, and then beyond that, just investing for growth. As you're more overfunded, you've got a bigger surplus, so more opportunities to invest for growth. It's how I treat the funded ratio as part of that. What are your thoughts?
I'm just enraptured by your response that I have none. I'm just
All right.
absorbing it. No, I was
Okay,
letting
then.
you do your thing. I figured I spoke so much for the other one that, you know, let Wade cook, as the kids say. You know, I think there's
I
the
just
first part,
heard skippity toilet.
huh?
I never heard the kids say "let Wade cook." I just heard skippity
No,
toilet.
no, no. Let them cook. Let them cook. Well, the kids should be saying, let Wade cook. No, listen. I think the first part is absolutely right. I think I get it when you see the stats that look, people's biggest asset is their house, and then next to it is their 401k, and their 401k is probably, I don't know, average is 60,000, but that's just an average. So I'm sure there's a, if you look at the another measure of central tendency like the median, I'm sure it's much lower. So I can see why people don't have that much in taxable. Proportionate to the country, you're absolutely right. But there's still a huge amount of folks, especially those that would be speaking to advisors, frankly, that have tons, a lot of their assets in taxable accounts, almost a nice proportion of it. And you're absolutely right. When it's the first part of your answer, wait, once you're there, it becomes actually one of the huge controllable things, as this person was also signaling, that you can control. So you best do that. And so yeah, I think I think it's number one with a bullet in terms of things you should be looking at. To give you that extra alpha, if you will. The second part, as it relates to the safe withdrawal rates and things like that, I agree. I have nothing to add other than yes.
All right.
I would say also we talked about the funded ratio in this episode. We've done a few episodes on that. It's been probably long in the tooth, so we could do some new ones. But you may want to check it out. Either late 23 or early 2024. We did a couple of funded ratio episodes. I think we did them with Blanchett too, right? I want to say
We
we did
did.
one or two of
Yeah,
them
and actually,
with
with
David,
this
right? David
episode in
Blanchett.
January,
Say it
in
again.
February, I'll have a public webinar where I'm going to talk about answering the question, like how much do I need to retire, and explaining the context of how that can be answered with the funded ratio, as a lead into the retirement income challenge that we'll do in the start of March.
Okay, and there'll be that, and you guys are gonna find out all you want to know about the payroll soon. this other cool little tool that we like to have in our back pocket. But that's it for the Q&As today. Wade, any other question, or you want to take us home?
No, we have one more episode on Q&A, but we've collected all the questions that came in about defined benefit pensions. But we've now covered any question not related to defined benefit pensions. So we're good.
All right.
Thanks, everyone.
All right, everyone. Thank you. And we'll catch you next week on Retire with
Style.
There you go, Wade. Thanks, man. All right, everyone. Bye.